For the past 2 weeks or so, I have been contemplating, thinking about, reflecting upon the funeral of H.W. Bush, and as many of you know, I did some reflections upon his life and upon his, quote, accomplishments. And I have one more to do on that. But in the meantime, on YouTube and elsewhere, there are conversations about H.W. Bush's funeral, and both the interaction and interplay of the main characters before the funeral began, before the actual service began, and also at the end of the service, where it is obvious that some people received an envelope. And virtually all of you have seen various renditions of this and have followed on some of these things right from the start. So I have taken pieces from both the complete funeral, also from especially George W. Bush's comments and his little speech during the H.W. Bush funeral, as well as pieces from others. And let me share with you what I see in both of these pieces, which I find to be absolutely fascinating. And let me reference first, before we get too far along, we have a couple of things that I really want you to see. One of them is, and I follow this person because I find it very interesting. It's called BodyLanguageGhost, and this woman goes through various kinds of public meetings and takes a look at these people in question and answering sessions. She's looked at James Comey, she's looked at Theresa May, she's looked at Merkel, and others. But she took this piece, this Body Language Ghost, has a section on the body language among the former presidents, Obama, Clinton, to some extent Carter, and others, both before and after the Trumps came in to the scene, and noted what they were doing. Now, she noted numerous things. For instance, that the interaction between the Obamas and the Clintons and how they were getting along, and the lighterness engagement between Michelle and Bill Clinton, and then the heavier engagement between Obama and Hillary, and how the four of them interplay. One of the things that she did not note, and you may take a look at in the complete filming of the funeral, was when Trump and Melania came in, first of all, everybody stiffened up, and she did note that. But also, as I noted, when he came around, that is, Melania and President Trump came around to their seat, first of all, he turned almost completely to the couple that was sitting right behind them, which was Mike Pence and his wife. And what I noted, and I thought it was really interesting, was that there was no visual connection between Donald Trump and Mike Pence. There was no acknowledgement of their presence. And if there was anybody in that seating section who would have been receptive to or responsive to or engaged with Donald Trump, it should have been his own vice president. And I noted, if you watch, there's no eye contact. Even when President Trump turns around and Mike Pence is right in front of him, less than 4 feet away, the two of them don't make eye contact. And I think it is very meaningful. So the later statements, the later engagements is meaningful as well. Secondly, I'd like to point out that before President Trump and Melania show up, the four are playing, and others are playing in the second row. And in the second row, of course, you've got the current vice president and his wife, Dan Quayle, the vice president when George H.W. Bush was president, and his wife. Then you've got the Bidens. No, first of all, you have Dick Cheney, who is W. Bush's vice president, and his wife. And then you have Joe Biden and his wife. And all of those people, that's the second tier, right? The vice presidents. The first tier has the Trumps, the Obamas, the Clintons, and then the Carters. And the Carters are really not in the picture at all. But the second part of this then has to do with the interplay during the funeral itself. And I'll give you some pictures on that. Both with respect to everybody being playful, being engaged, various kinds of comments, both by the former senator from Wyoming, who is supposedly a good buddy of his, a guy whom I respect. Can't even think of his name right now. I'll think of it in a minute. And then Jim Baker, who also gave a presentation. John Meacham, I think it is, who is the historian who painted a rosy picture, and you should note also made comments publicly after the funeral that Donald Trump may be committing treasonous acts now. What a favor he did for the liberals in that situation. And then you have W. Bush, who does the primary presentation in the middle or toward the end of the funeral. He is the culminating one. And it is quippy and it is playful and it's classic W. Bush. And I'm going to give you a couple pictures of the smirking of Shrubby Bush. Most of you know I don't like him, but he is cute and quippy. It's the kind of thing that you would expect to see at a bar. With him being winky, quippy, he's got this little smugness about him. His eyebrow comes down. He gets kind of squinty like, oh boy, that was a cute one. And I sure did pull one off, didn't I? And then there are pictures of, and I'm going to share those with you, of Laura Bush, of Neil and Marvin and Jeb and his wife, and how playful and engaged and tentatively relaxed they are. Now, Jeb doesn't ever seem to get relaxed, but that's, I think, more Jeb than anything else. Marvin and Neil in various levels are quite a lot more relaxed. And that same kind of relaxation and playfulness and laughing and giggling and seemingly relaxed atmosphere exists with the Obamas and the Clintons, among others, during the funeral. And then at the end of the funeral, as the color guard is picking up the coffin, and this is the part of the second half of what I'm trying to put together, which has to do, and if you take a look at Red Pill 78, you'll see a very good rendition that hundreds of thousands have looked at, which has to do with this secret note, this little card that 5 people got, 5 couples got. The Clintons got one, and Hillary in particular got hers. If you take a look at her, I'm going to try to get a picture of that. There's a picture of her, and I don't think anybody has noted this. I have never seen this on Hillary Clinton before, but the left side of her lip tucks down and tightens like this. And I've never seen that before. It is a girding, and it is a gritty girding, a sense of being out of control that one hardly ever sees about her. The Bill seems to be oblivious to a lot of it. The Obamas react. Michelle gets more reaction than Barack does. And Barack kind of acts like, well, gee, I saw that, oh well. But he's clearly a little bit put out by it. Joe Biden and his wife look shocked. I mean, they look like somebody has just died in a car accident or something. It is profound. Then you go over to the Bush side, and you have Laura Bush that got this card, who opened it, looked at it, showed shock. This is right after the completion of her husband's speech with the funeral. She looks shocked. She turns and shows it to Jeb, who, as the color guard is moving past them, has his hand on his heart And he goes from being the typical Jeb Bush, ill at ease, kind of a duck out of water, to being shocked when he sees it. And it just takes moments. It isn't like it's 5 sentences that he has to read. It's just a couple of words. And then Laura Bush, turns to George W. Bush, who's standing on the corner, and by this time has the coffin, supposedly with his father in it, right alongside of him. She turns and hands it to him and says, I think, is this true or is this real? One of the two. And he goes like this. Yup. And his eyes get strange. His voice, or his countenance, the look of his lip, the sad, overwhelmed, serious determination on his face, like he's gotten caught with something and he has to admit it beyond all measure. So there are 5 people, the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bidens, the Bushes, which included Jeb as well, and the 5th couple, which I find fascinating, given the earlier interplay between the president and the vice president, or lack thereof, the failure of them to even make eye contact, to even acknowledge each other, to even have President Bush either seek him out or Vice President Pence seek out President Trump's eye contact, to have some kind of partners in arms kind of connection in an otherwise hostile setting among all the people that are seated there. And now you have the Pences also getting the card, and they are one of the 5 people that get it. So not only does it apply to the neocon Bushes, the Obamas and Clintons and Bidens of the Democratic regimes that have gone on before, but it applies to Mike Pence as well and to his spouse. So it is fascinating that it covers all of them. They skipped over Dick Cheney, which is kind of interesting. You'll note that I don't think Al Gore was there, or at least not up front, which is by itself interesting, nor is John Kerry at the funeral, which is also interesting. So there are a couple of other things I want you to take a look at, one of which is, and I'm going to give this to you, a connection to a website which calls itself State of the Nation, and they describe this thing as the envelope affair. And the reason that I have juxtaposed these two seemingly disparate parts of the GHW funeral is that the first part of it seems playful and engaged, relaxed, interactive, for everything except the president. That is, he was not brought into or made a part of any of that. The second part of it is the smirkiness of George W. Bush and the playful kind of quippy nature of the funeral itself. And then the third part of it is this envelope affair, which has the most shocking elements in it. Now, there are a bunch of people on the internet that have said, well, this obviously means this, or this obviously means that. They were given an indictment. They were told that Arlington Cemetery is closed. There's stuff going on under it. I mean, there are all kinds of speculation about what it is. But nobody has come up with, I don't think, what it obviously is. And the reason I say that is, first of all, you have to say, we have to question whether everybody got the same message, which is possible that they did not. They all got a message which one would have to consider to be primal and shocking. And in the Bush's case, there has to be something which Laura Bush did not know, but she suspected or knew that George did. And you also have to know that Jeb immediately understood and gathered the essence of it. Did it have to do with 9/11? Did it have to do with the Patriot Act? Did it have to do with the Iraq invasion? Did it have to do with the termination of the mafia Bob-like leadership of H.W. Bush and the transfer from him to somebody else, and the fact that that was going to be interrupted? Any one of those is possible. The Bidens, the Clintons, and the Obamas were also equally shocked, probably most outwardly the Bidens, who obviously were caught flat-footed and shocked, mouth open, mouth drawn, absolutely shocked. And Hillary, probably the most unnerved I have ever seen her. So even when she is before congressional committees, even when she is answering questions with the media and the rest of that, you never catch her off guard. But in this case, she was more than caught off guard. So what did it say? I don't think it had anything to do with Arlington Cemetery. I don't think it had anything to do with an indictment being written, because obviously that would be too complicated. I think it has to do with something which said either the hammer is coming down, the jig is up, the end of the era is going to be marked. Be prepared for some kind of public event that is going to draw you out and capture you in your worst moment. Now, what does it say? You know, many people have speculation. I did something playful in one of my prior videos where it said something like, we found HW. He's obviously not dead. We found him in a shed. He's on his way to Gitmo, and we're coming back to get you. That would be appropriate and would fit that. But the question that Laura Bush asked, is this real or is this true? And George answering, yup, has to be profound in a one-sentence sort of way. So what are we to make of all of this? I think, first of all, take a look at the playful interplay that was done. One last comment, that I don't know who it is that handed the notes to the Clintons, the Obamas, and Biden. We didn't see that, and as far as I know, nobody has pointed it out. It was in a packet, but they all opened it at the same time. What is obvious is that the note that was given to the Bushes was handed to them by Secret Service people or FBI or whoever it was, but I think Secret Service people sitting right behind George W. Bush reached forward. They came around as that coffin was being picked up and handed it to Laura Bush. So for all of that, there are great notes. So what does all of this mean? I'm not sure any of us knows. I'm not sure any of us is going to know. I have to tell you, honestly, I have been jaded by all of the stuff that the hammer's coming down, the new world is coming in, the executive order takes effect, the latest one of the multiple executive orders of President Trump that could possibly impact sealed indictments and ongoing investigations and the rest of that. But I have been jaded about all of that because it doesn't look to me like an awful lot is happening. And Ghwb did not show up for the Clinton investigation. The two guys that were working on exposing the Clinton trust, the Clinton Foundation, did testify before Congress, and both of them intimated that nothing that they had given to Ghwb or the FBI or the Department of Justice seemed to have had any impact, and it was only the week or so before the scheduled hearings, which were going to include Ghwb, the investigator, the Justice Department guy, that is supposedly going to working behind the scenes with the Inspector General Horowitz and all the rest of that the government has in any sense interacted with those two investigators. I think it's also true that they probably have not interacted with Charles Ortel, who, if you have not looked, take a look at Charles Ortel, who has done incredible work about the Clinton Foundation and has done many interviews. All you need to do is look him up. So the question then is, what does this mean, and how is this going to play out in the first of the year? As someone who is jaded, I would say to you, my first reaction before I dug down into that funeral was nothing. Nothing is going to happen. It's all the same. You can take all this stuff, you can take all the resignations, the firings, the rest of the stuff and say, you know, what does this mean? Well, it still means that we have a two-tier government, that these elites like Hillary Clinton and the Obamas and the rest of them can get away with anything they want to do and nothing will happen to them. And that there is a disparity between the people that have been in office since 1980, that includes Vice President H.W. Bush, through the Clintons, through the George W. Bush bunch, through the Obamas, for that entire time from 80 to 16, which is 36 years, nothing is impacted those families involved in that process. So my first answer is nothing is going to happen. My second answer, however, is that the delivery of these notes at the precise time they were delivered, the people to whom they were delivered, and the profound shock that those people felt and showed and exhibited in the absolute vulnerable moments in which they were present at that funeral gives me pause. And it gives me pause for a number of things. First of all, seemingly nothing would shock some of these people. They have gotten away with everything from 9/11 to Benghazi to Uranium One to the Patriot Act. They have faked a major recession. They have worked closely with the Federal Reserve and the rest of that to undo most of what has gone on about us as the American public for the last 36 years. NAFTA and all the rest of this. This is all contrived to make us weaker, to take us down, to destroy the middle class. And they have looked us in the eye and they have gotten away with it. They have had the freedom to do exactly what they wanted with impunity through the entire time. So why is this different? And is it different? And I would say to you, when I look at the primal raw impact of what happened both at the start of that funeral with the casualness that was involved and with the juxtaposition to the primal revulsion, the absolute overwhelm that those five partners, pairs, families had and exhibited, that something is indeed happening, and it does make me, at some level, in my own jaded way, hopeful about the process. So I look at this next few weeks, hopefully, to say, if there's anything that those envelopes meant, and there has to have been something which it meant, if there is anything that it does mean, it means that there is a hammer of some kind coming down, and that those five families, those five couples, including Jeb and the entire Bush family, are going to feel the impact of it, and perhaps the rest of us will see it. Now, let me add one more piece to this. It could not have been timed more perfectly. It could not have been put into a more perfect situation, a more public and perfect situation. It could not have caught people more off guard than they were, and whoever it was that planned to have them get it knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew exactly how profoundly impacting it is going to be. the natural consequence, the natural thought about this would be that President Trump did it. And I think there is some potential truth in that. Why do I say that? Well, had he made positive contact, which again, nobody has noted, had he made positive contact with Mike Pence at the outset of that funeral, I would have said President Trump is as shocked as, or at least as caught off guard, or at least as oblivious and as unknowing about this notice as anybody else. And therefore, it did not come from him. But because he and Mike Pence did not even make eye contact, they didn't shake hands, they didn't respond, they didn't nod, I would say that what President Trump may have seen that the other parties got also went to Mike Pence with the same kind of impact, because there is and was an obvious barrier between them that tells me that they are not on the same wavelength. And if that's the case, they're not on the same wavelength with anybody else. It may also be noted that Vice President Pence and his wife came around to the front before the Trump showed up and had friendly engagement, or at least cordial engagement, with the Clintons in a positive sort of way. That was 20 times more engagement, or an infinite amount more engagement, than they had with his own president, for whom he is working now. So I really don't know what more to say about it. You will note in my comments immediately below the video that I have made note of the body language site, which I consider to be really good, the Red Pill 78, which I consider to be good. I will add a connection to, I think it's the ABC version of the entire funeral, and you can plug forward into it the section that I found interesting and quippy and witty about shrubby bushes at 1 hour and 50 minutes or something like that. And I will also attach to it the State of the Nation 2012.com, which has a nice little article on this to connect with. So take a look at all of those. I think you'll come to something of the same conclusion I have, which is there's more going on than the jaded ones among us have come to expect. So thank you for watching. I think this could be profoundly interesting. Thanks so much.